I'm an ROTC graduate from California, University of Pennsylvania. My host school is Pitt, who is our Pitt representative here. All right, go Panthers, come see me afterwards. I want to make sure you're taking care of my host school, California, University of Pennsylvania. Our guest tonight, Lieutenant General retired Horoho, undergraduate, UNC. Where are you? University of North Carolina?
You went home, sir.
Oh, not represented. We saw our graduate. Lieutenant General retired Horoho really has done everything within her profession that one could ask. You know, we saw two combat leaders where the typical introduction has commanded at every level from platoon through division and beyond. And in the profession that Lieutenant General Horoho has done, she has done the same. Most significantly, commanded 3 hospitals, including Walter Reed during 2007-2008, which was really at the height of the surge operation, where we were at essentially maximum capacity there with all eyes looking at how we care for our veterans. Before that, she was actually on site and was recognized as not just a nurse, but a nurse provider, putting her craft into action on 9/11, the date of which we all know is significant for us. She was on the scene and was recognized for her actions, providing medical aid during that event, and then most recently retired as the Surgeon General of the United States Army. And in advance of her coming up here, and we thank you very much for you making the time. She has, if you don't already know, I think a son that's a cadet as well. And in advance, I do have one question to start it off with, which is, why does the Surgeon General of the United States wear a uniform? I don't really understand that. Perhaps you can inform us on that as well. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker tonight, Lieutenant General retired Patricia Horoho.
First, I just want to say congratulations to everybody. This is a tremendous honor for each and every one of you to have been selected for this. But really what I want to thank you for is that each and every one of you made a decision to don the cloth of our nation and serve. And you did that at a time when our nation's been at war for many, many years. And so on behalf of everybody, thank you, because we are grateful and you're the future of our Army. And I think our Army looks pretty bright. So one of the things that I want to do, if we could put up the first slide. I don't have a lot of slides. And I may not have any, and that's okay. We'll be flexible. So I'll wait till it comes up. But one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do before we go to the picture that's up there is at your table, there's a piece of paper. There's a white piece of paper. I want every single person to grab the white piece of paper. When everybody at your table has a piece of paper, just one person at the table raise your hand. Okay, what I want you to do, and I need y'all to really pay attention, put your hands down. I want every single person to close your eyes and then just follow the instructions that I'm going to give you. And please don't open your eyes until I tell you to open, okay? So close your eyes. I want you to fold the paper in half. I want you to tear the right upper corner. Keep your eyes closed. Fold the paper in half. And tear the right upper corner. Fold the paper in half. And tear the right upper corner. strength test. Okay, now I want you to open your eyes and open your paper. Open it completely. And I want you to show it to the person sitting to the right and left of you. If every single person at your table has the same design on their paper, stand up. 100%, everybody at your table, same design. Let me just ask now, why do you think I had you do that exercise? Just so much color out.
Because we think different, man.
Say it again.
Because we think different, man.
Okay, you think different? What else? Go ahead.
Some people are stronger than others.
Okay, that's not something to brag about. Go ahead, please. Right. The reason why I wanted you to do that, as leaders, you're going to be given guidance, and you're going to give guidance that you think is very, very clear. And everybody who's listening is going to hear it differently. And so you've got to communicate and communicate and over-communicate. And when you don't get the outcome that you want, instead of looking at your soldiers and questioning why they didn't get it right, look inward first and say, how could I have been clearer with my communication? And so I know tonight, as I talk, you all are going to hear something totally different, and you'll walk out of here with a different impression. And then when we get to the Q&As, we can talk about whatever you want to do. But I love doing that exercise, and I did that with my leaders a lot, because the higher you go in an organization, the harder it is to have your message carried so that you have the outcome that's desired to be able to have mission success. So you can go ahead and get rid of your papers or do whatever you want. I wanted to be able to put up one picture here. And General Hughes and I, when we were young majors, were actually in the same Command General Staff College together. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my battle buddy. There is not a more ethically based leader than Chris, nor a better tactician on the battlefield, and there's someone that is so humble. And I have to tell you, when I looked at what the topic was this week on emotional intelligence, and you look at the attributes, I can tell you, he espouses every single one of those. So when you're looking at a role model, he is absolutely someone that I would look and I would study and find out what he did throughout his career. Because he did it with unbelievable humility and a love for his soldiers and the ability to take risk and lean far forward, calculated risk, but did that for the right reasons. And it was always to make sure that the Army was successful in whatever the mission was at hand. So I just wanted to give a shout out, since he wasn't here, for that. The other shout out, because I thought emotional intelligence, I have a son who's a cadet, and if I didn't do a shout out to Alpha Company, 1st Platoon, 3rd Regiment, I would not be hitting the right thing as a mama. So good to go out there. So what I decided to do when we talked about emotional intelligence, and I was trying to think of, everything you've done through the week, is I really thought I wanted to go over 3 different stories. And I'll talk about 3 different events that kind of occurred during my tenure, and the attributes that I think are associated with that, and then we can have some kind of interactive discussion. And so the first one that I wanted to talk about was actually when I was a captain, and I was at the University of Pittsburgh. I had just finished being in recruiting command, had Pittsburgh Recruiting Battalion, Harrisburg Recruiting Battalion, and then went to the University of Pittsburgh to get my master's in trauma clinical nurse specialist. And why I was there, and I'm going to age myself because this is before y'all were born, which is a really sad feeling as I look out across everybody. But in 1988 is when I was going to college. You actually had to type. And so I was typing my research study, and I had 60 typed pages. When you think of all the research that goes into it, 60 typed pages on critical incident stress debriefing. And that was going to be my thesis. And then I realized that I couldn't get enough patients to be able to do the study. So then I thought, okay, what else do I want to do? So then I looked and did research, and 60 typed more pages. I was, my second research study was going to be on burns and burn care. And when I was working on my thesis, they ended up firing the trauma surgeons, and I couldn't complete that study. And the Army gives you a timeline of when you can finish your master's program, and I thought, okay, now what do I do? And I was just married. My husband was deployed to Desert Storm. I was first time pregnant with my son. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm looking at my career and wanting to make sure that I've got a career in front of me. And so I ended up being able to do a research study that compared 2 different types of burn dressing. And so why am I sharing that? Because it dovetails into the next story. And so after that, I got sent to Fort Bragg as utilization tour. And when I got to Fort Bragg, like any leader, you kind of look and you say, okay, what impact can I have on the unit that I'm going to be able to lead? And so as I was looking, I thought, wow, we didn't have mass cal carts in place, mass casualty carts. We didn't really have a training program for mass casualties on how to respond. They were used to people coming in the ER, but we didn't have formalized programs. So we put together mass cal carts. We put together packets for patient administration. We contacted Pope Air Force Base, Cape Fear Valley Hospital, our hospital, and we did a training scenario. And the training scenario was going to be 2 planes colliding. And then we would respond to that. So we did some practice sessions, and our training scenario was going to be in April of 1994. And then on the 23rd of March at 14:15, the ambulance driver ran into the ER and he said, Captain Horoho, he said, there's been an accident on Green Ramp. And he said, we're going to get casualties, 2 planes collided. And I said, is this our exercise? And he said, no ma'am, this is real. And in less than 15 minutes, we had 2.5 trucks that pulled up outside of our emergency rooms with bodies stacked on top of each other. Because at Green Ramp, what happened was an F-16 collided with a C-131. And there was a C-130. There was a C-141 on the ground with 500 paratroopers. And there was weapons on the plane that was on the ground. And when it collided, a fireball and smoke ripped across Green Ramp. And the people on the ground did the scoop and run method. There were patients that were coming in on the side of deuce and halves and motorcycles. They had no uniforms on because of the heat that burned the uniforms off. And because we had prepared, we were able to quickly pull out the cards. We were able to take, and I took the best medic I knew and said, we cannot lose accountability of 1 American soldier. And I need you, because they don't have names on their uniforms, I need you to keep accountability. And so in the next hours, we actually treated 134 burn patients that came to Fort Bragg. We lost 23 soldiers that day, the 504th and the 505th at Fort Bragg. What I was able to do and the team together, what we were able to do, is then we had a critical incident stress debriefing. And I wouldn't have known to do that if I had not had the hardship of doing 60 pages of research. And the other thing that we were able to apply was being able to provide burn care in a trauma scenario outside of the hospital because there were so many casualties. I would not have known how to do that if I didn't have the hardship of having those two challenges at the University of Pittsburgh. And when we did the critical incident debriefing, what struck me was the person I had picked because she was my best medic felt so devalued because I had had her do accountability and not utilize her craft. I would have never known that's the message that I was giving to one of my leaders. And it only came out when we did the critical incident stress debriefing. And it allowed me then to be able to share the rationale of why I had selected her. And we didn't lose any accountability of any one of our soldiers. And one of the things that I saw that day was emotional self-control of the entire team. People responded that had no medical background, and we taught them how to be able to respond and put together IVs and be useful. We had people who held sheets around all the patients that were outside to protect privacy because the media was coming by. We looked and said, adaptability. So normally morphine is very well controlled, but at that time we had buckets of morphine that we gave to people, and we said no one needs to be in pain. And we put a nurse and a chaplain and a medic and a physician with every single patient. That's how many people responded to this. Empathy is taking care of others. When our soldiers were there and they were badly burned, when you would go up to take care of them, what they said to us was, "Ma'am, I'm not that bad. Please take care of my buddy." That is the best that we have in the American soldier. That's who you all are going to have the privilege to be able to serve and to lead. It's when people are willing to sacrifice and die for their fellow battle buddies. And so as you're here, take the time to get to know people, because y'all are going to connect somewhere else. And you're going to make a difference in the lives of those you have the privilege to serve and lead, and you're going to make a difference in each of your lives. The other thing that I saw in emotional intelligence was inspirational leadership. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sergeant Price, but Sergeant Price was one of the soldiers that was out on the tarmac that day. And when he saw what was going on, he picked up a young specialist, a young female, and he picked her up, he threw her in the air, and he jumped on top of her. And he whispered in her ear and said, "You get up and you get up and you run right now." And she did. And when she ran and she turned back, she realized he had taken the brunt of the fireball and gave his life for her. That's inspirational leadership. That's what it means to be a soldier and a leader in the United States Army. And that's what it means to not see the difference between gender, ethnicity, or other differences that we have. You see that each of us are an American soldier. And to me, I don't think there's any better way to share a story of inspirational leadership. So then life went on, and had many other assignments that were in there. And then the next crises, and I did have someone tell me, "Ma'am, we track your career." And I thought, okay, that's a little odd. And they said, "We track it so that we don't go wherever you go, because wherever you go, it seems like there's a bad crisis that occurs." And so, I won't even comment on that, but it is what it is. So the next place was actually getting assigned to Walter Reed. And I wanted to share that story because there's so many different leadership lessons that are in that one when you talk about emotional intelligence. And so at the time I had competed for a chief nurse board and got selected to be a chief nurse. And I also competed to get selected for command and was very fortunate to get selected to command. And so I'd asked for Fort Bragg as my first assignment because I knew I was #1 on the OML, and I thought, okay, I'll get Fort Bragg. And I got the very last thing I had on my list, which was Walter Reed. And I called their branch and I said, hey, why am I getting like the last thing I wanted on the list? And they said, because the Army needed to keep a good leader in. And the person who needed Fort Bragg would have to retire if she didn't get Fort Bragg because of some family situations. So you're going to Walter Reed and you'll go there for a year. And then you're going to go to Launch Goal to Command. So I said, okay. So I thought, well, what do you do in a year? You know, how do you impact in a year? And General Waitman looked at me and he said, we're going to get 2 years of work out of 1 year. And I thought, well, that was an understatement because it ended up getting probably 3 or 4 years out of 1 year. But when I got to Walter Reed, a couple things that I wanted to share with you is that, you know, I thought, okay, we'll improve the patient care experience. So I walked around and was talking with the staff and I said, hey, look at your environment and tell me what you would like to change. And I got all these blank stares and I thought, okay, folks, you're sitting in a chair that's got tape on it, your countertop is peeling, it's looking pretty run down. And they looked around and they had not noticed it. And I thought, how do you not notice that? And I realized they had asked for assistance over and over and kept getting told no. And then they just got used to something. And it was at a time when there was a BRAC, so a base realignment and closing, which means you can't make any improvements, monetary improvements, in a building because it's going to be BRAC, so it's against the law to do that. They were under a MIL-CIV conversion, which meant that they moved military authorizations to civilian and then civilian to contractors. So they were under almost like a hiring freeze and they couldn't hire people to do some of the logistics works of running the garrison at Walter Reed. And so they were having a lot of challenges. And then we had been at war since 2001. And the Army never changed the way that we managed our warriors. In Vietnam, we kept people for a very long time until they healed. And then after Vietnam, we really had people that went in, got care, and then they left. And now we found that people were staying 1, 2, and 3 years. And we had a lot of wounded warriors that were outside, living on the compound and then getting care. And so there was a building 18, where a warrior was in and there was mold in the room. And the reason why there was mold in the room is that they couldn't repair the roof because that would have been against BRAC law, but they spent $250,000 repairing a leak, but they couldn't repair the roof that was leaking. And so even after they repaired that, then the mold built up and we had a soldier that was out there. And then that hit the news. And it really showed that we had not lived up to our warrior ethos. And leaving a fallen soldier behind is really what America's eyes look at us. And so at that time, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Cody, and the Secretary of Defense, and everybody came in. And 2 things that happened the day prior when it broke. Small team came together, and people said, okay, what do you think we should do? And we were given advice. And I said, I think we need to move everybody out of Building 18. And everybody in the room said, no, that's not the right thing, because then it looks like we're guilty, and we weren't guilty of doing something. And what I didn't, and then the next day, General Cody comes in, and he, directs every soldier to get moved out of Building 18. I didn't share that with you to say, oh, look, I was thinking the right thing. I got to tell you, I really critically looked at myself and said, what could I have done differently to have my voice heard? Because I obviously didn't do a good job. And I may have felt strongly on it, but when there was enough numbers that had a differing opinion, I didn't keep pushing, and I should have. And so I share that with you because there's going to be times when you really have to have the courage of your conviction, and you may be the only one who feels a certain way, and you need to make sure that you're forceful enough so your voice is heard. So General Cody came in and said, okay, you all have, 1, the worst customer care in all of Department of Defense. You got a year to fix it. You got to figure out how we're going to take care of our warriors and solve this situation, and you have 24 hours to come up with a way that you're going to manage our warriors. And in that time frame is when what you all know is the Warrior Transition Brigade came about. what is now the Army standard of the triad that takes care of our soldiers. That was crafted in 24 hours. And it shows you how quickly that you can change something when you're under a crisis and people don't worry about who gets credit. You just look and say what's the right thing to do. And we were able to do that at that time frame. And then my command got changed. And my command got changed from Lawrence to Walter Reed. And I ended up taking over command. We had 42 investigations ongoing. A presidential commission at the same time looking at every aspect of the care that we were providing. We had over 600 members of Congress multiple times coming through in less than a year. We had the president come twice, and the Secretary of Defense came a lot of times, and then every general officer at that time, and I was a colonel at the time, that came through. And part of what we decided to do as a team is just be transparent and really not focus on all the chaos that was around, but to focus on what we wanted to change. And so I want to show this slide. When you look at this slide, tell me, what do you see? Someone just holler out. There's not a right or wrong answer.
Chaos and order.
Okay, chaos and order. Okay, what else?
Transition.
Transition, energy. What else? Okay, what do you have to drink? No. What's that? I'm sorry. Brainstorming? Okay. So did anybody focus on the white dots that are outside of where the chaos is? Can you see those? This is one of the slides that I would use with my general officers all the time. And the reason why I would use it is that it's really easy when the environment is very chaotic to focus on all the energy that's in the center. And to focus on what pattern is being woven or maybe unraveling. Because you can look at that kind of both ways. But what's important is to step back and look at what are the things that maybe someone else would not see as being connected to the issue that absolutely has an influence. And I think that's one of the things when we talk about emotional intelligence is really the ability to look through different prisms at a situation and try not to get caught in the chaos of what's going on, but to step back and look at those things that maybe many would look and say there's no relationship or it's disconnected. But step back and try to figure out how does that unrelated action have an impact on what you're trying to accomplish? And how do you then create the pattern that you want that allows you to really impact the outcome? And so that's really what the team did at Walter Reed, is they stepped back and they looked at all the things that were unrelated to the situation that was ongoing and decided to think differently and to be as transparent as they could. And so what they did in a year is pretty amazing. And at the end of that year, they ended up winning the Best Customer Service Award in Department of Defense, Army, Navy, and Air Force. And think about that. They did that at a time when 42 investigations were ongoing and every media outlet had nothing but negative news ongoing on that situation. And I think it really shows and demonstrates that the leaders that were on the ground and those that were providing patient care at that time showed emotional self-control. They showed their ability to have a positive outlook, their ability to be adaptable, and to not be wedded to what they have been doing, but to really look and be different. And so we actually brought Disney in the middle of all this. And I have to tell you, trying to get Disney to come in and help us, everybody and their brother thought we were off in left field. Everybody said no, all the way up. And I finally found someone that said, yes, we could spend the money and do that. And what it did is it forced people on the ground to think differently. and to widen their lens. And we thought, if you go to an entertainment place, you want the best experience in the world, right? You want to go and you want someone to be making it easy for everything you do to be enjoyable. When you are at your worst and you're wounded and your family's stressed, why wouldn't you want to come into a healthcare setting that does everything for you to make sure that it's the best experience possible and that we give back to those that gave so much? And just that little lens of looking at it different. And Disney's whole focus is safety. It's not on entertainment. It happens to be on safety. And healthcare's whole focus should be providing a safe environment. And so that was kind of one of those lights that were dots that was way outside of the chaos that was ongoing, but allowed us to create a pattern that was so completely different. And so I think it's looking, at conflict management. It was coaching and it was mentoring and it was ensuring that people felt confident and they understood the why behind their actions. Because you could put 1,000,001 policies in place and you're not going to move an organization. But if you can get to the frontline people understanding the why, then they're going to have the agility to be able to take the action that they need to drive the kind of outcome that they want. And so I could go on with several stories, but I wanted to give you some of those kind of 3 highlights, and then I'm going to share a couple of what I would say are my 10 leadership traits that I've learned over the years that I felt invaluable over a 33-year career, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions and answers. And if there's anything that I said that you all want to push back on or talk about or challenge, let's kind of have those discussions. Or if there's something that you thought, wow, I thought she was going to talk about this and she didn't, then go ahead and ask those questions. But I think when I look back over my career, probably the very first one is, I think the leader has to always seek to be understood and to understand the situation before they're understood. And so it's really that inward focus first before you can focus outward. And in the midst of chaos, if you keep doing the same things and expect a different outcome, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So there's a third slide that I wanted to share. There's a research study. Has anybody heard of the research study on caterpillars? Okay. It's not one of the fun things to read at night, but there's a research study on caterpillars. And this French scientist looked at caterpillars, and he took a planter, and he put the caterpillars end to end. You can connect them end to end. And then in the middle, he put the caterpillar's food. And for 7 days, he watched them, and they just went round and round and round, and they never stopped. And the only thing that made them stop is that one died, and it broke the connection, and then another one died. And the thing with caterpillars is that if you keep them connected, they will continually do what the person is doing in front of them to their own detriment. And so if we as leaders keep doing what we know and we're not getting the right outcome, we got to feel comfortable stepping away from that and breaking the mold and questioning. The other thing is creating a vision and a brand. And I know a lot of people will talk about vision, but I got to tell you, it's to me it's essential. Because if you can't paint a picture for those that you're leading, it's hard to inspire them, and it's hard for them to understand how they can push themselves to something greater than what they can do individually, but that they can do it collectively, and then answering the why behind that. The other thing is taking a step back to be able to move forward. There's, throughout my entire career, I said I could probably write a book on closed doors and being grateful for the closed doors. At the time, maybe not, but when you look back, all leaders fail. The leaders that are successful are the ones that get up and they learn from that. But I would submit there's very few out there that you could ask and say, did you go through your whole career and never make a mistake? You make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes and you fail forward. And then the other things, Field Artillery Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Wilkes shared with me, and it was one of the best advice I got as a young captain. And that was, he said, Captain Dallas, you live in a glass house. He said, from here on out, anything you do, whether it's legally, morally, or ethically sound, everything you do is going to be evaluated. And he said, and perceptions. And he said, you need to always look through the lens of how does this look to others. And I've got to tell you, best advice I ever got, and it kept me out of more trouble, so I thought I would share that with you. And then last thing is challenge assumptions and ask questions behind the questions. Dig deep to try to really understand what the answer is and understand the answers that you're getting. And then lastly is enjoy the journey. Because while you're serving, it should be something that you are passionate about every single day. And whether you serve for 4 years or you serve for 30 years, you will grow as a person, both personally and professionally, and you will make a difference, and hopefully a positive difference, on those that you have the opportunity to serve with and to serve for. And there's been no better journey than I feel like I've been able to be on in the last 33 years. So congratulations, and we'll just kind of open it up for questions and answers. Yes.
Matt Cadet Mercado from Loyola University in Chicago. My question is, what habits have you developed throughout your career to help make you the leader you are today?
I think probably habits that I've developed. So I get up every morning, and I've done this for years. I have quiet time and spiritual time, and that's what grounds me. And I have never separated out my faith from who I am. And I know that's kind of where I get my energy from. So that's where I started. The other thing is I've embraced lifelong learning. And I did start that way. So when I was at UNC Chapel Hill and I was getting ready to graduate, they said, hey, do you want us to write you a letter of recommendation for your master's program? And I looked, I said, I'm never going on for my master's. I said, I'm done. And then a couple years later, I had to call them back and say, hey, could you write me a letter of recommendation? And I got the same person who had, what are the odds? But I got the same woman who said, I knew you'd call back. That embracing lifelong learning, I think really, really has helped. And then the other piece is never, ever believe that it's you. Colonel Allman, and I'll explain my comment on that. Colonel Allman was an infantry commander when I was in recruiting command. And so as a nurse, I got my first, combat arms OER, and he was like, whoa. I mean, I thought, wow, this is like amazing. And I have it to this day. And he put on the piece of paper, and he said, Captain Dallas, we're never as good as what we are on paper. And I thought, okay, well, there was my happiness, and it just kind of went down. But what it said to me is, don't believe everything that's written about you, and realize that you are part of a team of teams. And that's the value that you bring to the team. So I think having humility and confidence and not being afraid to say you made a mistake. Yes, please.
Ma'am, Cadet Davis, University of California, Davis. Do you believe that getting the media getting a hold of the problems that Walter Reed benefited Walter Reed because of the exposure to the public?
Oh, without a doubt. So, it was a painful exposure, but one of the things that I felt at that time, we would have never made the transformative changes as an Army that we made in the way we care for our warriors without that national pressure. Because it caused a reversal of the MIL-SIF conversion. It caused unlimited funding coming in for our warriors. It allowed us to completely change the way we provide rehabilitative medicine. All of that would not have occurred, to be perfectly honest, because what happened at Walter Reed was happening at other places across the Army. It just broke at Walter Reed. And so I always believe there are opportunities in the midst of burning platforms, And what you've got to do is look what that opportunity is, and then you shape it and you drive it. And my whole career, I felt like there's a lot of burning platforms, to be perfectly honest. And it's stepping back and looking and saying, okay, how do you take this and drive the change that should occur? And it's a great question. Please.
Cadet Martinez, University of Texas at El Paso. As a nursing student, seeing your career progress has really motivated me. I wrote a paper on you.
I hope it was a good thing. How did she answer? No.
So my question is, here we hear a lot about how the combat arms plays into the mission of the Army. How does the nurse corps and the medical play into that mission?
Yeah, it's, it's interesting. One of the things that I did when I was a Surgeon General, and I did it very deliberately. When I took over, we changed our entire headquarters to look exactly like the Army. And some of you are going to be thinking, well, that's kind of no-brainer. For 296 years, Army medicine has kind of been separate and was configured very differently. And people did not know how to access individual relationships. And my thing, and I felt this throughout my whole career, it's not good to be different. We're part of the large machine, which is the Army, and we're an important part, because survival on the battlefield is being able to have medical personnel at the point of injury, understand weapons, understanding the injury, and being right there with the unit, because people are willing to put their life on the line because they believe medical care will be there. And it increases our ability to take high risks. So completely reorganized, and we put a G staff. I looked at all the headquarters and to say, okay, who are we more aligned with? We aligned in between, corps and a force comp, the size of the command, because it's 156,000 personnel. And once we did that, a couple of things happened. We went right into the budget crunch where they were cutting our budget. So my budget got cut by like $585 million, and we had to make that up in 6 months. The Army's budget was cut by a lot. And so we had all these meetings. We would have never been asked by the Army to go to those meetings when we were aligned the way that we were prior. But once they saw us as being part of the team and they knew how to enter, we then got calls and said, hey, you need to have a general at this meeting, you need to have a colonel at this meeting. And it allowed us then to preserve a training budget because I was at the table talking, or my 2-stars were at the table talking. So I believe the power that the military has is that every unit and every specialty is so vital for the Army to be able to do its mission. And one is not better than the other. Because if you have combat arms, but you have no one on the battlefield to evacuate their wounded, then how many mothers and fathers are going to allow their sons and daughters to raise their right hand? It's a strategic capability. It's the same thing with combat service support. Everybody is important. And so mine is, my advice would be, if you look and you think that the medical team is outside of the norm, work to get them in line to work with their colleagues. Because that's the strength that I think we all bring to the big Army to be successful. Please.
Yeah, in Korea University, ma'am. I really liked the image that you used to portray problem solving using cognitive complexity and creativity and seemingly jumbled and impossible problem, finding creative solutions to that. But another really interesting thing that I noticed about that infographic was that after that problem had been woven very deeply, it started to fade, started to become darker, right? So, man, what can you talk about not only finding creative and effective solutions to problems, but also making sure that they're sustainable, especially given how, the retention motivated officers looking to get promoted and a new job.
Yeah, it's a great observation, because that's actually one of the things we would talk about at the senior level. That slide, there's like a zillion and one things I think you can talk about and use it for scenarios. So I'll give you a couple things. So a current issue, and then I'll take it down to kind of, I think, the tactical level. So as a Surgeon General, when I was deployed to Afghanistan as a two-star prior to taking over, traveled 4,000 miles, went over 200 command outposts and in multiple FOBs. And I was in Cop Lightning. And one of the things that I noticed was they had a stack of prescriptions. And I looked at it and it was Ambien and Adderall. And so I said, tell me a little bit about this. I said, why do we have so many? And he said, well, ma'am, when our soldiers go out, he said, we're giving them Adderall to keep up and be repped and alert. And he said, and then when they come back, he said, they have a hard time, going to sleep, so we're giving them Ambien. And what hit me with that is I thought, oh my goodness, this is 2011. I thought we have missed an opportunity as an Army to wean our warriors off of poor sleep habits. And I thought, okay, that impacts health, combat readiness, cognitive, all of it. So the team, we crafted a performance triad of sleep, activity, nutrition. The reason why this is getting to your answer, to really look at that this is something that will improve the readiness of the force. If you really look at those things kind of integrated together. And someone said, one, you're not going to be able to do it. Two, the Army's not going to embrace sleep as a culture change. And trust me, my peers, all my general officer buddies gave me a lot of grief the first year, and then it kind of turned. Because a couple things that we said was, if you have less than 5 hours of sleep for 6 days in a row, you have a cognitive impairment of 0.08 blood alcohol. Think about that, okay? We would never let a soldier come to work drunk, right? But we let our soldiers come every day impaired because of sleep. And so that's really how we did that. And so then someone said, well, how do you know that this is gonna last past your tenure? So if you weave this fabric, and then your tenure is over in 4 years, how do you know it's not gonna fade away? And I said, the way that will be successful is if the Army sees this as their program and they never see it as a medical. Because as soon as they see it as a medical, it's not going to be institutionalized, and then it will fade away. And so what you have to do is you have to look at what you're trying to implement and understand and look way down the road to say what has to be in place that will allow that to sustain at the level that you need to. And need it to get it into the palm, and need it to get it into, trade-off, and they own it. The Chief of Staff of the Army and the Army owns that, and that's the right thing to have happen. So, does that kind of answer what you're talking about? Yeah, and so I think, when you're looking at the tactical level, sometimes you'll want to make a mark as a leader, and you got to question, are you implementing something because it'll look good on your OER? Or are you implementing something because you believe it's the right thing for that unit, your platoon, or your squad, or your company? And then if it's the right thing, you have to question and say, what else needs to be in place from either champions on the ground, because you're going to only be there for a short amount of time. So if you instill and you get people to buy in and they understand the why, they're going to own it, and they're going to keep things going after you leave. And to me, that's the importance of leadership. It's not that you can do it while you're there, is did it last after you left? And no, some things aren't because the environment changes. But if it's, so I would say from the tactical and the strategic, they're almost similar in what you look at. I'll go right like that. Go ahead.
Patrick Ward, Wake Forest University. Go ahead.
I'm on your side until we play each other. Go ahead.
You spoke about the Walter Reed incident in 2007-2008. I just finished reading Secretary Gates' memoir, and he writes pretty extensively about that whole process. But obviously, he's talking about changes that were made from very high up. You're speaking about that perspective from the perspective of the colonel. What advice would you give, though, for a junior leader who would walk into a situation that seems to be catastrophic to them? How do we begin to make an impact as second lieutenants?
Yeah, great question. I think, one, you're going to have the ability to see things way before some of the senior leaders will, because you're on the ground. And so I think, one, making sure your voice is heard. The second one is assess the situation and try to understand the why of what's happening. And then implement what you can, and then when you realize something is above your level, then put things down very factual. One of the things that someone taught me early on is, you know, on a 3x5 card, you only have a few minutes when you're going to go talk to a senior leader, a company commander, right? Or the major, or the, you know, or the lieutenant colonel, town commander. Think of what are the key things that you want to get across. Write those down so that when you go in there and talk, you are direct, you're on target, and then when they go to deviate on something, you can look down and re-anchor yourself to that. I found that to be one of the most valuable things that I was taught early on in my career. I think the other piece is if you don't assume that the leaders above you know what's going on, okay? And I don't mean that derogatory at all. But you're going to be able to hear things, see things that are going to be covered, or people aren't going to let get out of the company, out of the battalion and that. And that's one of the most dangerous things, is when people suppress things that shouldn't be going on in the first place. Have the moral courage to either directly talk about it and then go to a senior leader to talk about it.
Michael Carter from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. You mentioned bringing in Disney when you have the issues at Walter Reed. What problems did you face with that, and do you support that across the board?
Yeah, you know, that the first problem that I had is that it had never been done. People couldn't wrap their mind around it. You know, why am I looking at entertainment when all this chaos? So that was a big thing. It was outside of the normal contracting, how people have done it. So everybody I went to, you know, they said, it hasn't been done, can't do it. And so I kept getting told, no, no, no. And then I finally found someone where I could lay out and say, this has nothing to do with entertainment. It has only to do with safety. And there's a book, If Disney Ran Your Hospital, 9.5 Things That You Would Change. And so I got the book, and I had everybody, 5,000 people that were part of the hospital, read the book. So that we had leaders at each level understanding it, and then they did small group sessions kind of talking, and then we brought Disney in. And so part of what we did with Disney is we asked them to tailor kind of the way that they're talking so that it married up with the military culture and it made sense in the environment so that people could embrace it. And what I would just submit on that is I do like Disney, and the reason why I like them is it forces you to look at something different. And they empower people at the lowest level for service recovery. And I think that's what we do with our young soldiers, to be perfectly honest. Soldiers have the ability to make decisions at the lowest level. And so I think there's parallels. And so what I would just, offer to you is that as you're leading, look at what's current out there that's outside of the military. You're going to learn military training, you're going to learn leadership, but broaden your mind to look at other things that maybe you would be closed off to, or someone else would be closed off to. And then look at it and say, how can you take that and tailor it to impact what you want to do as a young leader in the military?
The oldest Alcorn State University. What would you say to a cadet that didn't get med cert what would you inspire and motivate?
Yeah. Okay. So I can give you a life lesson, and then I'll tell you what I would say. So when I was a young captain at the advanced course, I wanted to be a 91 Delta instructor. I don't know why, but I wanted to be that. I had my mind wrapped around that. And so I sat down with my assignments officer and I said, I'd like to be a 91 Delta instructor. And she said, we'd like you to go into recruiting command. And I said, I'd like to be a 91 Delta instructor. And she said, Colonel Kennedy would like you to be in recruiting command. And I said, I'd like to be a 91 Delta instructor. And she looked at me and I said, would you just, no, I'm not even white. Still in the Army, or was still in the Army after this. I said, would you just write it down, please, and take it back to Colonel Kennedy? And she took her pen, and she made a dot. And I looked at it, and I said, I'm going to recruiting command, aren't I? And she said, yes, you are. And I have to tell you, I was disappointed And I went into recruiting command and went to Harrisburg Battalion. The nurse in Harrisburg had a nervous breakdown, and there was nothing in the office but a telephone on the floor. I went to Pittsburgh recruiting. They had fired the nurse because she had never put someone in the Army in a year. And so trust me, I was not welcomed when I went, and my office was a broom closet, and I'm not joking. It was a broom closet, and I had to walk sideways to get into it to sit down. And I thought, okay, I didn't want to be here, and this is not going to be the best assignment of my life. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to figure out how to grow in this area. And Lieutenant Colonel Wilkes, who was the Field Artillery Battalion commander, would call me in, and when we put the first nurse on active duty, and I reported, and I said, sir, we just, commissioned a nurse, and he looked up and he said, well, you're 100% better than your predecessor. Dismissed. And, but then after that, he would call me in before I'd leave, and everybody would think I was getting chewed out in the morning. And he'd give me these hua talks and play Army music, and then he'd say, get out there, get out there. Put people in the Army. And so, and then I came in one day, and my office my little broom closet was gone, and I thought, oh my God, I'm fired. He had given me a bigger office because we made mission box for the whole year, which is when you do your complete mission every single month. I share that with you because I've had multiple assignments that I never wanted. Actually, most of my assignments, seriously, have always been the opposite of what I asked for. And so what I would share with you is people are going to see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And they're going to push you in areas that you just don't want to go. But they see a potential that's going to cause you to grow. And I learned more about the Army in recruiting command than I could have ever learned. And to me, it changed who I was as an officer. And it really reframed that I was a soldier, I was an officer, and I was a nurse. And that's what I brought to the Army. So there's going to be times you're going to get assignments, and I can tell you you're not going to like them. Just go with it. Because I have found every single one of them that I've grown, and I've ended up really liking those assignments. So I don't know if that answered it, but been there, done that. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, please, ma'am.
Cadet Huffman from University. One question, was there ever a time during your career or during the time that you went to school at which you felt very discouraged? And if so, what did you do to pick yourself up and to become the woman you are today?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. So I'll tell you, when I was a first lieutenant, I was at Fort Carson, Colorado. Two things happened there. So I was at Fort Carson, Colorado, and I worked for a leader who probably was the most caustic leader I've ever had in my entire career. And all 10 of us lieutenants were going to get off of active duty. And it was just so stressful. And she would berate and just really demeaning to everybody. And she would call each of us in and she would say, Lieutenant, my name was Dallas, and she'd say, Lieutenant Dallas, your peers think you're incompetent. They don't think you're good in the emergency room, they don't like working with you, and they don't think you know how to nurse. And then she'd pull in the next lieutenant and she'd say the same thing. And we didn't know that this was occurring. So you go and then you're working with your peers and you're thinking, wow, they think I don't know what I'm doing. You're questioning yourself. It was the most stressful period of time. And we had this mass casualty that happened one night. 30 casualties came in, we took care of them, and she came in the next morning and she, in front of everybody, and she looked at me and she put her finger on top of a door frame. This is a World War II building. And she looked at me and said, Lieutenant Dallas, you didn't dust. Well, we never dust. I mean, that's not what we're there for. But she said, you didn't dust. And she just did it to humiliate. And I looked at her and something snapped. My jaw locked. And she then said, okay, you come in my office right now. And so she started, talking to me. And a one-way conversation. And she looked at me and she said, when you get angry, she said, your eyes turn green and your jaw locks. And I thought, you're not taking advice from someone that you know. And I thought, And so then she said dismissed, and I walked out, and I walked past this mirror, and I stopped and I thought, oh my goodness, that is the ugliest expression I've ever seen. And I thought, to be honest, my jaw locked and my eyes were green. But something in me said, don't ever let someone have that influence over you again. And what I realized at that moment, I then went to my peers and I said, listen, if you have a problem with my leadership or how I perform, please tell me. And they said, well, we don't have a problem. And that's how we all realized that she was doing the same thing from that. And to be honest, she ended up getting relieved. But what I learned from that is a couple things. Is one, you allow someone to make you feel that way. Don't give that power to someone else. The other piece that I learned from that is, as a leader, you've got to be in charge of what you look like. That your inward has to match the way you want to be as a leader. And I learned at that moment that I would never have someone have that control over me. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I don't know if that answered it or not, but yeah, and then right after that, I got a call from Branch, and they said, hey, we'd like to move you to Fort Leavenworth, Letterman Army Medical Center, and they said, you have 24 hours to think about it, and I thought, okay, I'll think about it. And I'm going to give this advice, because this isn't how it should go. So I went home, I was dating a cute guy from Colorado, my brother was infantry, he was assigned there, my brother-in-law was field artillery, he was assigned, so I called her back and I said, hey ma'am, thanks so much for the offer, but I love where I'm assigned and I'd like to stay here. And she said, Lieutenant, you have no future in the Army. She said, you have no future in the Army Nurse Corps, and she hung up the phone. And I remember standing there and I'm thinking, oh, I won't say what I thought, but so then I walked down to the chief nurse's office and I said, ma'am, I think I stepped on it. She said, what? And I told her and she said, okay, dismissed. So I turned in my resignation papers. And I was getting off of active duty, and I was a 90-day loss. And Colonel Journey came through the ER on a Sunday and said, Lieutenant, not all doors are closed. And I remember saying, I'm supposed to get something out of that. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm supposed to get something. And I thought, maybe I'll try to stay on active duty. And so then I applied for conditional voluntary death. When I became the Surgeon General, I ran into Colonel Journey, and she said, do you want to know the rest of your story? And I said, I would love to, ma'am. What? She said, I never turned in your resignation papers. She said, I knew that if you could get to the point where you were staying because you wanted to stay, you would do very well in our Army. I didn't know at the time that I couldn't pull back my resignation papers. So I share that with you because people will mentor you and you won't even realize you're being mentored sometimes. And what I would submit, you're going to be mentoring others and they may not realize that you're mentoring. Yes?
Ma'am, Cadet Morgan Vogel from Illinois State University. Earlier you had mentioned the performance triad, and I was curious on how you feel the performance triad has changed your Army.
My favorite thing to talk about. Yeah, you know, I think it's had a dramatic change on our Army, and I'll tell you from a couple areas. So at a time, what happened was sleep active nutrition, and nutrition is anything you put in your mouth, tobacco cessation, nutrition and that. And so the Army was able to tie the performance triad to the global assessment tool and get that information. And then there is research that is tied, evidence-based research, sleep active nutrition, that actually is tailored to whether you're in combat, whether you're a civilian, whether you're, working in a garrison, and then we tied it to wellness centers to give people their own personal health data, and it's still evolving. The importance about it is that we've a couple things. At our wellness center, we had individuals that only went to the wellness center one time, had a 4%, 63% of them that went just once, had a 4% decrease in their body mass index and a 15% increase in their cardiovascular output. We had a reduction of people that were on blood pressure medication and cholesterol. The General Odierno, who's the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time, and then General Milley has continued it. It gets briefed at every general officer course. to the spouses, and to the leaders, because they understand the importance of, if we're going to have cognitive agility and dominance, you've got to make sure that what you are feeding your brain and your body is going to allow us to have the best combat effectiveness. And so where I knew it was catching on is when the Army was going through a budgetary reduction, and we actually got it funded, $20 million got put in the palm on the last year as when I was Surgeon General. And that showed that the Army was going to continue this. So it's still got a long way to go. We looked at 20,000 soldiers. We had brigade commanders in Afghanistan as a pilot. We had garrison soldiers, different units, and we compared. And the brigade in Afghanistan actually came back healthier than when they had deployed. And so there's a lot of really good research that's out there. What I would just ask you all as young leaders is that help break the culture of feeling like it's a badge to say, I only slept 4 hours or I only slept 5 hours. Because I have to tell you that, to me, the way we are going to decrease accidents and risks associated with our profession is when we embrace a culture where we get enough sleep. And obviously, when you're deployed and you're in a combat scenario, you're not going to get your 8 hours of sleep or 7 hours of sleep. But then how do you sleep bank? How do you do certain, bits of naps and that, downtime, to be able to make sure that you can keep on going? And so they're working on a research study of like a fuel gauge to look on someone's sleep. And what happens if maybe you're in amber and you're in red, but you get a 10-minute nap? Does that put you in green? Does that keep you still in amber? Looking at it individual. Technology and data is what's going to drive the future on how we get healthy and how we can really employ our soldiers to be the best that they can. I could go on a lot, and I won't, because there'll be a lot of people asleep in the back. And this is not where I want you to get your 7 hours of sleep. What other questions, comments? Please.
Cadet came from the University of Illinois. So you mentioned when you took command that you went to hospital where like the desks were peeling and the chairs were broken and no one seemed to care. So how do you get people who are in an environment of being settled into like a poor environment, and how do you convince them that they deserve a better one?
Yeah, that's, so I think, it's, you kind of have to look at how you communicate first. And I'll tell you one of the things that I did. So I was really struggling with why people couldn't see. To me, it was obvious. I mean, it was really, really obvious. And I thought, okay, people should just get on this bandwagon. We should be able to fix this quickly. And I couldn't get people to do it. It was just, and so I thought, okay, something I am doing is not effective. So I pulled, at that time, there were 1,000 nurses, and we pulled them together, and we did a one-day training, and everybody, rolled their eyes like, oh, here she goes with, doing this touchy-feely. And I said, just bear with me for one day. And we did this spectrum training. Has anybody heard of spectrum training? So spectrum training is just, it color codes your communication style. And there's 4 colors. And so gold are like people that are very A plus B plus C, very loyal, duty on their country. Your blues are more of kind of your touchy-feely, emotional, connect with people. Your greens are data analytics, people who they quest knowledge, so even when they've got the answer, they'll dig deeper and probe because that's what drives them. And then your orange are kind of high-risk takers, and they like change. So we did this exercise, and you're different whether you're an introvert or extrovert, and you have all colors, but you show kind of primaries. So we did this one exercise, and they said, okay, all the oranges in this room, in that corner, all the greens over there, blues over there, and golds over here. And so people are moving, and so I moved into my corner as an orange, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited. Out of 1,000 people, I was the only orange. Seriously, what are the odds of that? Most of them were golds, and the other half were blues. And so what I realized is I was stressing 99% of everybody I was trying to lead, because what I thought was a good change and was motivating me was stressing both of them. And so what it did is I learned how to communicate differently with both of those groups. Those were the groups, when everything broke at Walter Reed, actually helped drive the change. They drove more change, but we would not have been able to do that had we not had that self-awareness. And what it allowed us to do, to be perfectly honest, because you have high achievers and high performers, and so one of them was a green, and so when another high performer would say something, she was like drilling, and you could watch body language. I mean, it was just the arms were like this, and people were getting frustrated. Well, once we realized why she was doing that, people would just say, "Oh, the green's showing," and she'd say, "Oh, okay," and then it moved right on. I mean, it broke things down. So what I would say to you is that whenever you're not getting the results, really look first at how you're communicating and try to understand the people you're leading, so that you can communicate in a way that they receive it and they understand it. And then it's amazing what people can accomplish. Any other comments, questions? And someone keep me on time, because I want to make sure that I'm not, if I'm already over, I'm going to apologize, but someone keep me on time. Are we over? This is an index. I'm going to get a no-go at the station. Okay, I think we probably, thank you all very, very much, and the opportunity to